several members of the Trump campaign, including ex-National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, had 18 previously undisclosed discussions with Russia in the 7 months before the election, multiple sources told Reuters. The conversations began in April 2016, sources told the news service, months before Trump even secured the Republican nomination for president. Sources familiar with the communications said that so far there's no sign of wrongdoing or collusion. But the Trump administration will likely face new scrutiny for not disclosing the conversations, as it has denied any collaboration with Russia to influence last year's election. News of the conversations comes after the Justice Department announced Robert Mueller would serve as special counsel in investigating possible links between the campaign and the Kremlin. Trump, who didn't make the special counsel decision, fired back at Mueller's appointment. With all of the illegal acts that took place in the Clinton campaign and Obama administration, there was never a special counsel appointed. Trump tweeted Thursday morning. "This is the single greatest witch hunt of a politician in American history," he wrote in a second tweet. Sources told Reuters that the conversations mostly focused on strengthening U.S.-Russian economic relations. Russian officials said they wanted to take a more business-like approach to deal-making and focus less on hot-button issues that have cooled relations between the nations in the last few years. While it's normal for campaigns to start speaking to foreign countries, the frequency of the discussions raised some eyebrows. It's rare to have that many phone calls to foreign officials, especially to a country we consider an adversary or a hostile power, Richard Armitage, a Deputy Secretary of State under President George W. Bush, told Reuters. Flynn spoke with Sergei Kislyak, the Russian ambassador to the U.S., in 6 of those undisclosed conversations, Reuters reported. The retired Army general was fired in February after misleading Vice President Pence about conversations he had with Kislyak in which he promised to lift recent sanctions by the Obama administration. Acting Attorney General Sally Yates had previously warned the White House that Flynn was in a compromised position when it came to Russia. Kislyak was known to meet with other members of the Trump campaign, including now Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov told CNN in March that the diplomat also met with people working in think tanks advising Hillary or advising people working for Hillary, however. The other dozen calls, emails and text messages were with other members of the Trump campaign and people considered close to Putin. Ukrainian oligarch Viktor Medvedchuk was one of those Putin allies believed to have spoken with members of the Trump campaign, the sources said. Putin is the godfather to Medvedchuk's daughter. Medvedchuk, in an email to Reuters, denied the conversations took place. "I am not acquainted with any of Donald Trump's close associates, therefore no such conversation could have taken place," he said. No other member of the Trump campaign has been identified aside from Flynn, because American citizens are protected, or masked, in surveillance operations. U.S. officials can request they be unmasked in certain circumstances, however. The White House didn't return Reuters' request for comment, but the president has routinely denied members of his campaign colluded with Russia. His son, Eric Trump, tweeted Wednesday night that the allegations were a witch hunt propagated by a failed political campaign. Republicans may be reluctant to fully take on President Donald Trump, but that doesn't mean the scandal involving his presidential campaign's contacts with individuals connected to the Russian government will simply go away. At least 18 calls and emails took place between Russians and members of the Trump campaign between April and November 2016, according to a new report by Reuters. Michael Flynn, the former National Security Advisor who was forced to resign in February after it was revealed that he had lied to Vice President Mike Pence about his contacts with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak, was among the Trump campaign members who corresponded with Russians during this period. Of the 18 communications, 6 of them were phone calls between Kislyak and Trump advisors, including Flynn. These interactions had not been previously disclosed by the Trump campaign, which in January claimed there had been no communication between themselves and Russian officials during that election. They later revised that, admitting to 4 meetings between Kislyak and members of the Trump team had occurred during that period. The 18 interactions are considered to be part of the larger body of information that is currently comprising investigations into alleged Russian meddling in the 2016 presidential election by both the FBI and investigators in Congress. While the current and former American officials who reported this to Reuters say that they have not seen evidence of criminal activity in the communications themselves, the fact that these exchanges contradict the Trump campaign's initial version of events inevitably arouses suspicion and increases the desire for a full account of the relationship between the Trump campaign and Russian government. Michael Flynn and other advisors to Donald Trump's campaign were in contact with Russian officials and others with Kremlin ties in at least 18 calls and emails during the last 7 months of the 2016 presidential race. Current and former U.S. officials familiar with the exchanges told Reuters. The previously undisclosed interactions form part of the record now being reviewed by FBI and congressional investigators probing Russian interference in the U.S. presidential election and contacts between Trump's campaign and Russia. 6 of the previously undisclosed contacts described to Reuters were phone calls between Sergei Kislyak, Russia's ambassador to the United States, and Trump advisors, including Flynn, Trump's first national security advisor, 3 current and former officials said. Conversations between Flynn and Kislyak accelerated after the November 8 vote as the two discussed establishing a back channel for communication between Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin that could bypass the U.S. national security bureaucracy, which both sides considered hostile to improved relations, 4 current U.S. officials said. In January, the Trump White House initially denied any contacts with Russian officials during the 2016 campaign. The White House and advisors to the campaign have since confirmed 4 meetings between Kislyak and Trump advisors during that time. The people who described the contacts to Reuters said they had seen no evidence of wrongdoing or collusion between the campaign and Russia in the communications reviewed so far. But the disclosure could increase the pressure on Trump and his aides to provide the FBI and Congress with a full account of interactions with Russian officials and others with links to the Kremlin during and immediately after the 2016 election. The White House did not respond to requests for comment. Flynn's lawyer declined to comment. In Moscow, a Russian foreign ministry official declined to comment on the contacts and referred Reuters to the Trump administration. Separately, a spokesman for the Russian embassy in Washington said, "We do not comment on our daily contacts with the local interlocutors." The 18 calls and electronic messages took place between April and November 2016 as hackers engaged in what U.S. intelligence concluded in January was part of a Kremlin campaign to discredit the vote and influence the outcome of the election in favor of Trump over his Democratic challenger, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Those discussions focused on mending U.S.-Russian economic relations strained by sanctions imposed on Moscow, cooperating in fighting Islamic State in Syria and containing a more assertive China, the sources said. Members of the Senate and House Intelligence Committees have gone to the CIA and the National Security Agency to review transcripts and other documents related to contacts between Trump campaign advisors and associates and Russian officials and others with links to Putin, people with knowledge of those investigations told Reuters. The U.S. Justice Department said on Wednesday it had appointed former FBI Director Robert Mueller as special counsel to investigate alleged Russian meddling in the U.S. presidential campaign and possible collusion between Trump's campaign and Russia. Mueller will now take charge of the FBI investigation that began last July. Trump and his aides have repeatedly denied any collusion with Russia. It's rare. In addition to the 6 phone calls involving Kislyak, the communications described to Reuters involved another 12 calls, emails or text messages between Russian officials or people considered to be close to Putin and Trump campaign advisors. One of those contacts was by Viktor Medvedchuk, a Ukrainian oligarch and politician, according to one person with detailed knowledge of the exchange and two others familiar with the issue. It was not clear with who Medvedchuk was in contact with in the Trump campaign, but the themes included US-Russia cooperation, the sources said. Putin is godfather to Medvedchuk's daughter. Medvedchuk denied having any contact with anyone in the Trump campaign. "I am not acquainted with any of Donald Trump's close associates, therefore no such conversation could have taken place," he said in an email to Reuters. In the conversations during the campaign, Russian officials emphasized a pragmatic, business-style approach and stressed to Trump associates that they could make deals by focusing on common economic and other interests and leaving contentious issues aside, the sources said. Veterans of previous election campaigns said some contact with foreign officials during a campaign was not unusual, but the number of interactions between Trump aides and Russian officials and others with links to Putin was exceptional. "It's rare to have that many phone calls to foreign officials, especially to a country we consider an adversary or a hostile power," Richard Armitage, a Republican and former Deputy Secretary of State, told Reuters. Flynn fired. Beyond Medvedchuk and Kislyak, the identities of the other Putin-linked participants in the contacts remain classified, and the names of Trump advisors other than Flynn have been masked in intelligence reports on the contacts because of legal protections on their privacy as American citizens. However, officials can request that they be revealed for intelligence purposes. U.S. and allied intelligence and law enforcement agencies routinely monitor communications and movements of Russian officials. After Vice President Mike Pence and others had denied in January that Trump campaign representatives had any contact with Russian officials, the White House later confirmed that Kislyak had met twice with then-Senator Jeff Sessions, who later became Attorney General. Kislyak also attended an event in April where Trump said he would seek better relations with Russia. Senior White House advisor Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, also attended that event in Washington. In addition, Kislyak met with two other Trump campaign advisors in July on the sidelines of the Republican convention. Trump fired Flynn in February after it became clear that he had falsely characterized the nature of phone conversations with Kislyak in late December, after the November 8 election and just after the Obama administration announced new sanctions on Russia. Flynn offered to testify to Congress in return for immunity from prosecution, but his offer was turned down by the House Intelligence Committee.